Good evening. So yeah, welcome to this module on internal security. So first things first, to tell about the module, like among all the topics which are considered as relatively easy or simple in mains part of the syllabus, I generally see most of the students telling me that internal relations is one easy one and internal security is one such topic. The reason being, most of the times, without exception, all the questions are directly picked from current affairs sources. So, and that too, which are very much in current, and also number of topics are also not many, hardly 6, 7 good topics are there. And this is one such topic which is familiar to everybody, isn't it? It's not that even before your civil services preparation has started, you guys would have heard about Naxalism, you guys would have heard about insurgency, you guys would have heard about terrorism. See, these are very familiar ideas. And also UPSC is giving good number of questions from this topic. So keeping all these aspects in mind and the point which I have mentioned before, that it's an easy topic, that itself makes it tougher, because as it's an easy topic, all the students would easily attempt. Generally, no student would prefer to leave a question, from internal security, because they know it's an easy one. They should not skip it. And yeah, that's the reason we should try our best, so that our answers stand out. At least one extra point or two extra points in each question, so that our discussion will stand out, is something you guys have to carry on. You guys have to work about. Okay. So having said this, and yeah, I could see that most of the aspirants here are like a good number of faces are familiar ones. It seems to be senior aspirants have joined more. So now that I'm a little concerned, because my initial plans were to do this module only for the sake of beginners, and I expected more of beginners to join. Now it makes me even more responsible, because most of the aspirants are the ones, they are senior aspirants, so I have to be a little more cautious and I have to go a little deeper. Initially, I thought if it's only for beginners, like that's fine if I touch upon the basics and go. But now that I'll ensure that not just basics, but also some contemporary trends in the topic has to be covered. Right. On this note, now sharing the screen. Please note, and like for most of the modules we do. So here also, like I'll be giving PDF. So by the end of the module, you will be having good amount of material, so that you will have to prepare for. Right. I'm sharing the screen. So these are the 6 topics. Let's quickly run through them. Linkages between development and spread of extremism. Then topic 2 goes like role of external state and non-state actors in creating challenges to internal security. Third topic is like challenges to internal security through communication networks. Role of media and social networking sites in internal security. Topic 4 goes like challenges, basics of cyber security, money laundering and its prevention. Topic 5, security challenges and their management in border areas. Linkages of organized crime with terrorism, and various security forces and agencies, and their mandate. And luckily, UPSC also is strictly confining to the syllabus, because this is one such topic where it's difficult to define syllabus, but UPSC has given topic in such a breadth that everything will be part of the syllabus. So yes, at least that much is something good to know. Then today I'll start with topic 1: linkages between development and spread of extremism. So yes, it is suggestive, right? Linkages. So what kind of linkages exist between development and spread of extremism? Development and spread of extremism. So let's try to see it. So here in this context, development means, say, what kind of development? It can be economic development, social development, political development, psychological development, and technological development. Everything should be included as part of the development. Now we will try to see what kind of linkages do exist between development and spread of extremism. Means, does development has something to do with extremism, which means poor development, can it contribute to extremism? And we will also look at other way. Does extremism contribute to poor development? Both sides we will try to analyze. Both sides we will try to analyze. Having said this, and we often see students committing mistakes due to lack of clarity on certain basics. Say they use terms interchangeably and without confidence, so that's very normal. So let's try to identify certain terms and try to I understand the specifics of that term, so that it will be easy for you and you will try to use these terms confidently in the exam. Okay. Somebody please mute yourself. So extremism. You guys should know what is extremism. See, extremism is the quality or state of being extreme, or the advocacy of extreme measures or views. What is this? It's quality or state of being extreme, or the advocacy of extreme measures or views. Means if somebody is advocating extreme measures, or if somebody is advocating extreme views, we call them extremist, right? Say opposite to it is moderation, right? Say Buddha is known for its moderate views, and the suggestions also he gave are moderate in nature. Just like that, if somebody tries to make things extreme or suggest extreme measures or extreme views, we call them extremists. Okay, this is some basic literal understanding. Term is primarily used in a political sense or religious sense. We generally use this: religious extremist, political extremist. So religious extremist, political extremist, to refer to an ideology that is considered by the speaker or by some implied shared social consensus to be far outside the mainstream attitudes of the society. Means this so-called extremist, he'll be harboring views, and these views are such that they are not part of the mainstream. They are not the mainstream attitudes. Sometimes they might be antithetical to the mainstream values, mainstream social values. They also may be antithetical to the mainstream ethical norms. They may be antithetical to both mainstream ethical norms, or they may be antithetical to mainstream social values. So yes, such people or such organizations, we call them extremist organizations or extremists. It can also be used in economic context. However, the term is usually meant to be pejorative. Pejorative means like negatively loaded or negative connotation. Okay. Then extremist views are typically contrasted with those of moderates, isn't it? They are contrasted with the moderates. Somebody with moderate views are called as moderates. Somebody with extreme views are called as extremists. Look at this good example. In Western countries, for example, in contemporary discourse on Islam or on Islamic political movements, the distinction between extremist and moderate Muslims is commonly stressed, isn't it? Among Muslims also, we say some Muslims are moderates, some are extremists, isn't it? We often come across these kind of narratives in newspapers. Say we come across like, say, Shias are generally moderate or Sunnis are generally extremists. Like these kind of generalizations, of course, they are not correct, but these kind of generalizations we often come across or we often hear, isn't it? So such people with moderate viewpoints are called as moderates, and people with extreme viewpoints are called as extremists. Okay, then observe this carefully. Political agendas perceived as extremist often include those from the far left politics to far right politics as well. Say radicalism is a kind of extremism. Reactionism also is a kind of extremism. Fundamentalism is a kind of extremism, and fanaticism. Somebody please mute yourself. Now, as soon as you guys join, make it a point to mute yourself, okay? So it will not be distraction to others. Right. So here we'll also try to get familiar with these ideas so you can use them confidently. Radicalism, reactionism, fundamentalism, and fanaticism. Let's try to quickly go through these ideas also. Look at this: radical politics. So what are radical politics? Radical politics. I'm sure very frequently you guys also would come across this term in your newspapers. Policies of this government are radical, or ideologies of this organization are radical, isn't it? This term usually it's used very loosely. But now let's try to see the specifics. Radical politics denotes the intent to transform or replace the fundamental principles of a society or political system. Look at that. See, every society or every political system often have certain fundamental principles. Means the basic principles every society will have. For a society to run, say, let's say, marriage, family, kinship, religion, economic organization, political organization, these are all fundamental. But say somebody with a radical view, he might say that marriage has lost its relevance to contemporary time. Or he may say religion has lost its relevance. Now there is no place for religion in the contemporary society. So these kind of people who have this extreme views, they are called as radicals. And radical politics, this happens through social change, structural change, revolution, or radical reforms. And the process of adopting radical views is termed radicalization. So how this kind of radical politics they operate? They operate through social change. So what is a social change? Social change is a change that is happening in the societal norms, social institutions, social behavior, all these things, we call it as a social change. Social change. Social change, it should not be strictly spoken in terms of literal sense. Social change means all these things now. Social relationships, social institutions, social norms. If there is a change in all these things, only then we call it as a social change. You must be thinking, what are the social institutions? Social institutions means the same examples which I have given now. Say marriage, family, kinship, religion, all these are examples of social institutions. If there are any changes happening in them, then we call it as a social change. It can also be social relationship. Then you must be thinking, what is this social relationship? I'm not talking any sociology. This is all basic things you would learn in your society. Social relationship means, let's say, hierarchical arrangement of people according to caste system is part of India, isn't it? Say people are hierarchically arranged. Somebody upper caste, somebody middle caste, somebody lower caste, and they have dynamics, they have interactions and interrelationship among the people who are placed at different levels of hierarchy. So if there is any alteration in this, or if there is any change in this social relationship, that we call it as a social change. That we call it as a social change. So social change means nothing but changes occurring in social institutions, changes occurring in social relationship and social behavior. All these things we call it as a social change. So you can expect expect a question in your exam also. What do you understand by the concept of social change? And what are various factors that can contribute to social change? Isn't it? Suggest some measures to ensure that the social change happens in a peaceful manner, or the transition of social change happen in a predictable manner, something like that. You also have to be prepared for such a question. Don't try to interpret every word just literally. No, social change has much broader understanding. Okay. Then what is structural change? Structural change, I think structural change is one word which is familiar to you guys, isn't it? You guys must be aware what is a structural change. Often you guys come across this term in the newspapers, right? Structural reforms. Structural reforms means, so what are structural reforms? Structural reforms are those reforms which are, which can stimulate change in the economic structure. Economic structure, like say presently Indian economic structure is the one dominated by, say, primary sector, secondary sector, tertiary sector, dominated by primary sector, and later by tertiary sector, later by services sector. If by some reason tomorrow in India, say if manufacturing sector starts dominating, then we call it as structural reform. Then we call it as change in structure. Then things we do to achieve that is called as a structural reform. Is called as a structural reform. Okay. So we are trying to literally interpret every important sentence. Then radical politics will also happen through revolutions. A revolution like French Revolution is an example of revolution. Russian Revolution is an example of revolution. Or radical reforms. Radical reforms means sometimes through certain legislations or through certain policies also there will be radical reforms. Okay, so that is about this radical politics. Radical politics. To understand in one simplest way, radical politics means to change at the root level. To change at the root level means trying to completely uproot the existing model of political system or social system and trying to replace it with completely new one is called as radical politics. Anybody would like to quickly cite an example of a radical politics? Any quick example of radical politics? A political agenda which is radical. Any example? Any policy which is considered radical? Something like that. Okay, yeah, fascism can be considered as radical, and I don't know, Hindutva politics to some extent. Yes, we can call it. Yes. Surya, 1991 reforms, should we call them radical? It depends, like it's relative. If we want to call them radical, maybe we can call it, but of course, that enabled a transition from socialism to capitalism. I agree with you, but I don't want to consider it as a radical change. It's gradual and incremental only, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Revolution is an example of radicalism. Akbar withdrawing jizya tax. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So I think with the examples you guys have given, there is some clarity with you guys, I believe, on what are radical politics. Of course, there won't be a question in your exam like what are radical politics, but you guys being aware of these kind of terms, that will make you easy to write these kind of terms in your answers. Okay, yeah. This is the social change. Social change involves alteration of the social order of a society. Okay, it may include changes in social institutions, social behaviors, or social relationships, as I have told. Then another important term which you guys must be familiar is, very often you come across this term, right? Reactionary government, reactionary policies, or and when you are reading your modern history, you also will be say, who's that guy who is known for reactionary policies, from Governor General Lord Lytton. I think Lord Lytton is known for his reactionary policies against press. And in that context, also you would have come across this term. So, what is reactionary? See, reactionary means a reactionary or a reactionist is a person or entity holding political views that favor a return to a previous political state of society that they believe possessed positive characteristics that are absent in the contemporary society. See, who is a reactionary? A reactionary is a person who want the present society to move into its previous political state. And he also firmly believes that the contemporary society does not have the positive characteristics. See, it is one thing to say that going back to Vedas is correct, but saying that everything in the contemporary society is trash and we must try to bring back Rigvedic society is a reactionary idea. Right? Why do you want Rigvedic society now? Rigvedic society might be relevant in Rigvedic times, but we cannot say that Rigvedic society is relevant in contemporary times. Say if we strongly advocate that this is high time we should go back to Rigvedic society because contemporary society has nothing good for humanity. That's a kind of reactionary view. Okay. So as an adjective, the word reactionary describes points of views, reactionary policies meant to restore a past status quo. The word reactionary is often used in the context of left and right, both. Left-wing and right-wing people, both of them use this term reactionary or adopt reactionary policies, right? And is one tradition in right-wing politics. In right-wing politics, of course, we have reactionary trends very often seen. So in popular usage, it is commonly used to refer to a highly traditional position, one opposed to social change or political change. So, however, according to political theorist Mark Lira, a reactionary earns to overturn a present condition of perceived decadence and recover an idealized past. They believe strictly that present condition, there is a lot of decadence, means society is decaying, social values are degenerating, people are losing their modes, all these kind of ideologies they'll be having, and they want to move to an idealized past, means they want to establish, say, kingdom of God, or that's how they'll say, or they want to go back to Rigvedic society. All these kind of reactionary ideas they'll be having. Such a reactionary individuals and policies favor social transformation in contrast to conservative individuals or policies that seek incremental change or to preserve what exists in the present. We generally, listen very carefully, get confused with the term conservative and reactionary. Though they might look similar, there is slight difference. Reactionaries also want massive social transformation. Reactionaries want massive social transformation, but this massive social transformation which they are visualizing or which they want is going back. Conservatives, they are fine with what is now. They are status quo. Conservatives means, and they do not want any radical changes. They do not want any transformative impact. No, conservatives, it is fine. What's happening is good, and let's take things one after one in a gradual or incremental manner is the idea of conservatives. So hereafter, don't use these two terms in interchangeable manner. There is difference between reactionaries and conservatives. There is difference between reactionaries and conservatives. Now, can you guys recollect of any good example in the recent times of any reactionary policy which you have felt made by any governments, any reactionary policies, or any reactionary initiatives taken by any government in India or in the world? Anything you guys could recollect? That's what. Turkey government, yes, Ramya. To some extent, we can say that the present government of, it's right wing, and they are known for their reactionary policies. Yes. CAA, no, should not call CAA outright reactionary policy. That's what now the choice of words are very, very important now. So reactionary, if you observe carefully, it's an extreme term. Okay. So don't use terms like reactionary to CAA. Okay. Yeah, Islamic State in Syria, good. Maybe love jihad as a policy by certain organizations is good. Monica, I don't think within rolling back some of the Trump's initiative is reactionary, right? It's part of regular political stratagems which they play. Hong Kong, one nation, two states. It's not clear, Ma Manisha. Can you be a little more clear? So be very clear. Say reactionary means, see, these people, they believe that what is present is not so good. So they want to go back to their previous political state of society. Means they want to go back to original society. Means going back to Vedas or going back to times of Prophet Muhammad, something like that. Such a people are called as reactionary people, and their policies, if sometimes they have tacit support from the state, then we call it as a reactionary state with reactionary policies. Reactionary state with reactionary policies. And Al Qaeda is a classical example of being reactionary. Okay. Yes. You can see it here quickly. Reactionary means wish to return society to a former time. Will try to make change through both violence and peaceful means. Extremely unhappy with the contemporary society. They wish for immediate, unlike conservatives, and profound change now. They are on the far right of the political spectrum. They are on the far right of the political spectrum. Far right of the political spectrum. Such people are often called as reactionaries. Okay. So what is political spectrum? Just for the sake of your understanding, if this is the left wing, this is the right wing. Okay. So one end of the political spectrum starts with fascism, Nazism, slightly better, monarchism, conservatism, liberalism, socialism, communism, anarchism. We will go in a little bit more detail in the later part. But for time being, for the simplicity of understanding, try to see that this is the political spectrum. Okay. Then another word which is commonly used, which you guys commonly find in newspapers and all, is this word fundamentalism, isn't it? So I want you guys to be aware of this term, fundamentalism. Fundamentalism is usually has a religious connotation, and it indicates unwavering attachment to a set of irreducible beliefs. Means the people who are fundamentalists generally, they belong to some or other religious denomination. They belong to one or other religious denomination, and they have an unwavering attachment to a set of irreducible beliefs. Irreducible beliefs means their beliefs are so strong that they cannot be challenged. They don't like their beliefs to be challenged, and they believe that their beliefs are irreducible because means they are non-negotiable. That's it. However, fundamentalism has come to be applied to a tendency among certain groups, mainly in religion, that is characterized by markedly strict literalism, as it is applied to certain specific scriptures, dogmas, ideologies, and a strong sense of the importance of maintaining in-group and out-group distinctions, leading to an emphasis on purity and the desire to return to a previous ideal from which advocates believe members have strayed. Okay, it's easy to understand now. Markedly strict literalism. Literalism means they believe in literal interpretation, very strict interpretation of their scriptures or the dogmas associated with them or the ideologies associated with the religion, and a strong sense of the importance of maintaining in-group and out-group distinction. Means they insist, say we all belong to one religion, so we are one in-group, and everybody who are not part of the religion are out-groups. So they are treated as out-group. They strictly want to maintain this distinction between in-groups and out-groups, leading to an emphasis on purity. And they believe that all those who are in our in-group, they are pure, and somebody out of it are impure. And the desire to return to a previous ideal from which advocates believe members have strayed. They also believe that some of the members of our in-group, they have strayed, means they have deviated from the moral path, and they have deviated from the fundamental beliefs, and they believe that it is their responsibility to bring them back into that fold, which is nothing but the in-group. Okay, so rejection of diversity of opinion as applied to these established fundamentals and their accepted interpretation in the group often results from this tendency. Okay, so that is about this fundamentalism. Fundamentalism, often you come across, say, Hindu fundamentalism, Islam fundamentalism, isn't it? This is where you come across these kind of terms. Islamic fundamentalism. These are the places we generally come across these kind of terms, right? So that's about this idea called fundamentalism. Look at this caricature. It's just doing the work of the Almighty. So this is how they try to advance their fundamentalist thought process. Look at this, the fundamentalist pharmacy. They don't believe in stem cells or they don't believe in evolution. Nothing. Only what's in the Bible. Only what's in the Bible means. So they have, if somebody goes to them for treatment, some leaves, some oil and wine, or hem of Jesus robe or balm of Gilead, all these kind of, means they don't believe in science, and they believe a lot of obscurantist thought processes, obscurantist thought process, and they believe that. And recently, I've seen one Malayalam movie. The movie's name is Trans. It's such a nice movie wherein it's a classical example of this, wherein the pastor in that movie, he built such a huge empire just by trying to manipulate the belief system of believers of that particular religion, and they try to make people believe that all diseases can be cured by taking these kind of stuff. That's how depriving people of access to scientific aspects like allopathy. So yes, and this thing, I just want to make a mention. I'm not discussing it. If your time permits, try to read about this Samuel Huntington Clash of Civilization. I know it's not possible to read the whole book, but at least try to be aware of the gist of the book. Gist of the book, or core content of the book. It's It's a very interesting one, though I have not read it in total, but a few ideas are relevant to our exam demand also, and it will help you guys in writing good essays. Though I don't want to discuss the whole thing, I just want you to observe few things. Say Huntington says that religion can be a source of identity, and it is true that religion is an important source of identity. Just like caste is an important source of identity, just like for some people language is an identity, for many people in the world even today religion is an identity to which they identify themselves much more than nations also. So political differences are less important in the world than before. Samuel Huntington says that political differences means people having similarity in political ideologies, people having similarity in political ideologies, increasingly becoming, I mean, it means to say that with this globalized world, and in all parts of the world, democracy has become a norm, or democracy is fast becoming a norm. Then there is not much difference when it comes to political views among people, or when it comes to political ideologies among people. Increasingly, all people are moving towards an economic system called as capitalism. Increasingly, all people are moving towards a political system called as democracy. So there is not much diversity in it, and there is a tendency for homogenization, in which world over an economic system called capitalism has become a strong or dominant current, just like that democracy has become a strong or dominant current. So globalization has made nation states less significant as a source of identity, so religion is a better source. So it's a very, very important idea. Observe carefully. Globalization has weakened national identity according to Samuel Huntington. He says that globalization, global world, people moving, and goods moving everywhere. So globalization has made the concept of nation state less significant. Has made the concept of nation state less significant. Here, yeah, I also should take care of the beginners. So what is a nation state? What is a nation state? Yes, please. What is a nation state? What is a nation state, ma? Yeah, that's a reactionary measure, right, Manisha? Turkey government converting Hagia Sophia Museum into mosque. No, Praswell, we should not call recent farm laws as a reactionary method. It's a political reform. Okay, it's a reform they are trying to bring. Sorry, it's an economic reform they are trying to bring in the agriculture sector. We should not call it reactionary. You will understand better once I share the document with you. Read a couple of times, that try to understand the difference between reactionary. Then you will not commit these kind of mistakes. Yes, please. What is a nation? What is a state? And what is a nation state? What is a nation? What is a state? And what is a nation state? All these are in NCERTs, ma. It's a simple question I'm asking you guys. Good. Very good. Yeah, I think you guys are telling. Very simple. State is a political entity. Nation is a cultural entity. What did I say? State is a political entity. Nation is a cultural entity. Nation is a cultural entity. State exists on. State is a physical entity. State is a physical entity. State is a physical entity means, say for instance, for something to be called as a state, India is a state. India is definitely a state. Why? Because India has borders. India has a standing army. India has a standing army. India has a defined geography. India has a defined geography. It has, it has something called as state. It has sovereignty. So we can call India as a state. But is India a nation? No. India is still a nation in making. Is India a nation? India is a nation in making. Why is India a nation in making? Does all people in India identify themselves with the same national identity that all of us, without exception, do we have this strong feeling of national identity saying that we all are Indians? No. Northeast Indians still they don't want themselves to be identified as Indians. Same is the case with Kashmiris, and occasionally many people who are that's in the country we have different kinds of regional movements, linguistic conflicts, all these things we have. All these are a proof of a point that we are still not a perfect nation. We are still a nation in making. So nation is a mental construct. Nation is a social construct or mental construct. Nation, idea of nationhood exists in the minds of the people. So people have to believe that they all belong to one nation. India is a perfect example of a state because state has political boundaries, but nation does not have political boundaries. Nation has cultural boundaries, and there are only few countries in the world for which political boundaries and cultural boundaries overlap. There are only few countries in the world for which political boundaries and cultural boundaries overlap, in which all the people have this strong sense of belief that they belong to one nation, that they belong to one nation. Okay, such a territories are called as nation states. Nation states means these are the countries in which people not only share the political boundaries, but people also share cultural boundaries. People have a strong sense of belonging to one nation. People have a strong sense of belonging to one nation. That is called as nation state. So there is a difference between what is a state, what is a nation, and what is a nation state. What is a nation state? Okay. I'll tell you example further, Janvi. All of you understood this idea? All of you understood this idea of nation, state, and nation state, or any lack of clarity? Everybody understood, ma? If anybody does not don't understand, let me know. I'll try to explain it again. Let's say India is a state. India is a state. Say if India is a state, which means say India has people, population. India has territory, defined territory, and it is sovereign. It has standing army. So this makes India a state, which means India has political boundaries. What is a nation? A nation is comprised of all the people. Nation is comprised of people. Nation is comprised of people who all believe in one national identity. One national identity means all these people who are a part of a nation, they should have this strong sense of feeling that they all belong to one nation. So nation is a cultural boundary. Nation is a cultural boundary. Means all the people residing here, almost without exception, they should have this strong sense of feeling that they belong to one nation. And India is still a nation in making. India is still a nation in making. Why India is still a nation in making? Because still many people in India, especially the Kashmiris or Northeast Indian insurgents, they don't believe that they belong to India. They don't believe that they belong to India. And for them, something their native tribal identity or Kashmiri identity is more important than the national identity or Indian identity. So it will take some more time for India to become a perfect nation. So as of now, India is still a nation in making. Then what is a nation state? A nation state is one in which the political boundary and the cultural boundary will overlap. Yes, there are examples. Some people say that Switzerland is a good example of a nation state. Switzerland is a good example of a nation state. People also say that. People also say that even Japan also is a good example of a nation state, because Japan is dominated by one community, and presence of minorities in Japan is very insignificant. Very less number of minorities we have in Japan, and most of the Japan is comprised of people belonging to one nationality. I think Han people, something they are called. sorry, not Han people, people belonging to one particular ethnicity, people belong to one particular ethnicity. So Japan also is considered as one good example of a nation state, wherein cultural boundaries overlap with the political boundaries. Cultural boundaries overlap with the political boundaries. Okay. Israel, you want? Is it clear, much, Chandrasekhar? Israel, I don't think Israel is not even a proper state, ma, isn't it? It's still, you know, divided, and it's not yet even properly recognized. So let's better not take Israel as an example. Okay, there are a lot of uncertainties surrounding Israel. Then, globalization makes old conflicts more likely to re-emerge. So, what are the old conflicts? Nothing but conflicts based on religion. There is now conflict between Christians and Jews in Palestine. Isn't it? Clinging to our religious identity, clinging to our religious identity because our nation state and political identities are being dissolved. Political identities, people are no longer interested in, isn't it? Even in India, people are busy now fighting for religion, fighting about religion. Huntington says that religious differences are creating an us and them hostile relationship. Religious conflicts are more significant than political ones because they are rooted in history and culture. History and culture. And so he predicts that clash of civilizations will happen again. Means again, once again, people will start fighting on religious basis. People will start fighting on religious basis, according to Samuel Huntington. So Huntington says that religion can be a source of identity. Political differences are less important in the world than before. Globalization has made nation states less significant as a source of identity. So religion is a better source. Globalization makes old conflict more likely to resurface. Example, there is now conflict between Christians and Jews in Pakistan. Clinging to our religious identity because our nation state and political identities are being dissolved, isn't it? People no longer are interested in the national identity, or fact that they belong to one nation is slowly getting replaced with, they belong to one religion. That phenomenon to some extent is also seen in India, right, in the present times. Huntington says that religious differences are creating an us and them kind of hostile relationship. Okay? So that is about this Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations and his ideas. Right. So going a little further, just look at this. How in the contemporary times there is this entire spectrum. Say on one hand, there are people who are devout followers of religion. Then people saying Bible is not infallible, man not made in God's image, no miracles, no virgin birth, no deity, no atonement, no resurrection, agnosticism, and atheism. So this is the entire spectrum. People who are devout religious followers, and on one hand you have people who does not subscribe to any kind of religion and they make mockery of the religion. We have people belonging to both ends of the spectrum in the contemporary times. Then who are these fanaticists? Fanaticism is mad love. That mad love can be either for a particular politician or his political ideology, or to particular religion or to particular religious ideology. That's it. Mad love, wherein ability to think rationally gets obscured. Ability to think rationally gets obscured, and they just sway to the tunes of the politician or to the political ideology. Such a thing. And fanaticism, fanaticism is of like both political fanaticism and religious fanaticism. Okay. So what is fanatic? Who is a fanatic? It's a belief or behavior involving uncritical zeal or an obsessive enthusiasm. It's like unchallenging. It's like unchallenging and blind adherence or dogmatic adherence, and say an allegiance to whatever they say. That can be the politician or that can be a political ideology. Say their uncritical zeal or obsessive enthusiasm. Uncritical zeal means they won't question and they blindly follow it. Such a people are called as fanatics. Okay. The fanatic displays very little strict standards and little tolerance for contrary ideas or opinions, isn't it? So you would often see the fans of certain film stars. So they are more than fans; they are fanatics. So they will not withstand any kind of tolerance against anybody. Say if anybody says something against their favorite politician or their favorite cricket star or their favorite film actor, they won't remain calm. They go to the extent of even harming the people who have criticized them. Means their enthusiasm is obsessive and their zeal to particular person or particular ideology is uncritical. Okay. In that context, religious fanaticism is defined by blind faith, the persecution of dissents, and the absence of reality. So they may even go to the extent of persecuting the dissents, means people who try to have dissenting opinion, they try to even persecute them, and they are far from reality. They are far from reality. Such people are called as fanatics. And to and trying to put things in perspective. So all these are antithetical to democracy. All these, without exception, whether it is religious fanaticism or whether it is extremist ideologies or it is reactionary policies, without exception, all of them are antithetical to democracy. Antithetical to democracy. Even the fundamentalism is antithetical to democracy. So yes, so be prepared for such a question also. Let's say fundamentalism is antithetical to democratic values. Discuss in detail. Then we should try to understand, say, what is fundamentalism and how fundamentalism is antithetical to democracy. How fundamental is antithetical to democracy. Yeah. Anybody can try to attempt this particular thing. If I say fundamentalism is antithetical to democracy, say how and why fundamentalism is antithetical to democracy. Why and how fundamentalism is antithetical to democracy. Very good. It's a good discussion. Very qualitative discussion. It can, yes, fundamentalism can hurt secular ideals. Very good, Chandrasekhar. Yes. If it can hurt secular ideals, definitely it is countering the purpose of democracy. Yes, as Sriram is saying, it does not permit for discussion, deliberation, and dissension. When there is no dissension, when there is no discussion, when there is no deliberation, and only thing that stands out is fundamental viewpoints or fundamentalist ideologies, definitely it is hurting democracy bad. Minority views will be suppressed. Very good, Arpita. Yes, minority views will be suppressed. Democracy celebrates diversity and diverse ideas to exist, whereas fundamentalism does not let diversity thrive. Very good, Ramna Reddy. Suppression of ideas. Yes, of course, suppression of ideas. Religious interests dominating national interests. Yes, of course, Suraj. Religious interests will dominate national interests. Communal politics. Correct. In a fundamentalist society or in a place where fundamentalists are dominating, politics are the ones dominated by identity-based politics. No freedom. Of course, Ravindra can make it a little more elaborate. Fundamentalism leaves no space for acceptance, no scope, sensitivity and tolerance. Good, Mashruti. Threat of communism leading to social disharmony, communal conflicts, intolerance, curtail and opportunities. Religious beliefs, no tolerance, no promotion of brotherhood, no consensus. Very good, Pooja. Democracy is all about freedom and equality to all, but fundamentalism is going in past with no elements of dissent. Good. Fundamentalism does not have good Janvi, does not have platform for recognizing values of each individual about their rights. It gives only majority and minority. Good, Sarah. Nice. Inherent rigid nature, fixating to their own ideals, whereas democracy strives for a common growth. Good, Monica. Democracy put certain class as a protector of society, negates the idea of one vote, one value, discriminates women in certain society. Very good, Prajwal. Very matured ideas. Democracy is based on pillars of liberty and freedom, whereas fundamentalism believes in one ideology, which is again the basic value of democracy. Good. Democracy is accommodation of difference, whereas fundamentalism is not. Good. Good, Archana. Fundamentalism go through religious doctrine, but democracy considers all sections. Fundamentalists bring change through regular review through elections, but fundamentalists avoid it. Of course, fundamentalists do not want any change in the power. That too in a peaceful manner. They don't want it to happen. The concept of peaceful coexistence to the relevance in fundamentalism. Good, Ramnarity. Good. See how many good kind of points have come here. This is even sufficient to write a small essay. That many good ideas you guys have contributed. Keep it up. Very good. So yes, that finishes off some basics which I want to touch before I go to this particular topic called as in today's session. Naxalism, I do not want to start it now, but just for the sake of continuity, I'll write it. Linkage between development and extremism. Linkage between development and extremism. So definitely, is there a linkage? Definitely there is a linkage. So yes, it can be social development, human, political, economic development. So wherever the extremist viewpoints or extremist ideologies dominate, development will get sacrificed there. Development will get sacrificed there. And development, lack of development in turn can, lack of development can in turn breed extremist ideologies. They are mutually complementary. Wherever there is extremism, it compromises on development. Just like that, wherever there is underdevelopment, it fuels or it further aggravates and exacerbates extremism. Exacerbates extremism. So it's like bidirectional linkage. So yeah, let's quickly review what has happened in today's class. So we try to know what is extremism. So extremism is nothing but having that extreme measures or extreme views. So it can be both political extremists or religious extremists. You have both religious extremism and also political extremism. Then you came across this term radical politics. Radical politics means these are the type of politics which calls for change in the fundamental principles of society or political system. Here I have one important assignment for you guys. Make a list of this is a very important thing, please don't ignore. Make a list of radical changes in political, social, and economic spheres. Often advocated by social scientists. Think carefully and try to make a list of all of them. What is it? Often you must be coming across in newspapers, say list of radical changes in say political, social, and economic spheres often advocated by social scientists. Say, let's say some people they'll be suggesting that India should be thinking about China style totalitarian regime because democracy did not work. It's such radical views you will be seeing, right? So make a list of all such things. Don't just confine to political sphere, also in social sphere, also in academic sphere, you would have come across such kind of radical ideas. So make a list of all such ideas. Okay. Then another work for you, make a list of reactionary leaders, policies, governments you have come across in the recent times. It's not that these questions will be asked in the exam, they'll just increase your confidence in attempting certain topics. Just like that, what is fundamentalism, types, Islamic fundamentalism, Hindu fundamentalism, fundamentalist beliefs, problem with them. Just go through it. And yeah, Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilization, just try to go through the gist of it once. So that's it. And also read about concept of nation state after the class. Seniors must have been aware, but yeah, beginners, I know I did not give it adequate time to make you understand completely. So that's the reason I'm suggesting it's written in all NCRTs. So read about concept of nation state. Okay. That's it for today's class. Tomorrow's class, we will try to make it a little more detailed and lengthier also if time permits. Okay, ma? Thank you.